Hello everyone, this is Greyshot151 here, and today on Greyshot Productions I have a new what-if scenario for you. But a little bit more outlandish than the previous one, but I think you'll enjoy it all the same. In 1896, Italy invaded the small African nation of Abyssinia, only to be shockingly defeated thanks in part to better leadership and better arms of the African nation. But this victory would not repeat itself with Italy's second incursion, as hundreds of thousands of men prepared to right a war they felt their nation was wronged in. The victory increased Italian pride, boosted Mussolini's fame, as well as his fascist regime, and increased Italy's foreign colonial territories at the cost of hundreds of thousands of lives over the course of the occupation. But what if things went unexpectedly? What if Italy lost the Second Italo-Ethiopian War? For such an unlikely scenario to occur, two things would need to happen. First off, Japanese and Italian relations would need to be antagonistic prior to the war's start. Why Japan specifically? Out of all the nations in the world, Japan was the only nation Italy feared would intervene in the conflict. Another non-Western nation falling to a Western power didn't look too well for the Japanese, a non-Western nation. So to increase tensions, let's say in this world Mussolini is more abrasive on foreign relations, causing the meeting between the Japanese ambassador to Italy, Dr. Yotaro, and Mussolini to fall through in July 1935. Mussolini demands Yotaro to tell his nation they should stay out of the war or risk an entanglement with his Roman Empire. Maybe he throws out an insult at the emperor for an extra measure. Either way, Italy scoffs at the thought of Japanese intervention as the nation declares war upon Ethiopia in late 1935, receiving strong condemnation from Japan, unlike in our own timeline. The second ingredient needed would be a Britain more opposed to Italian expansion, or at the very least willing to do something about it. See, at the tail end of 1935 in our own timeline, Stanley Baldwin of the Conservative Party was elected with the express goal of ensuring global stability, but he allowed Italy to conquer Ethiopia in the hopes of forming an alliance with them and France against Germany. So let's say that Baldwin, instead of trying to win over Italy, as he believes Italy would never side with France and Britain, unlike those around him, decides on a new course of action, without direct British involvement, contacting the Japanese in the process. In these conversations, he would note many things. Britain would not intervene on either side if war were to break out, Japan could use British ports to resupply if it were in a war against Italy, and if a war were to break out, Japan would receive special exemptions in the Second London Naval Treaty approaching in 1936 due to the war. These offers aren't huge motivators for Japan, but with its people already urging for war, the nation decides to test its navy and launches into conflict, taking Mussolini by surprise as Japan declares war on the side of Ethiopia with a naval strike in March 1936. Italy would quickly realize the British were supporting the Ethiopians and the Japanese, but Mussolini would be unwilling to declare war on Britain, even if they were supplying arms to the Ethiopians, fearing the loss of their access to the Suez Canal. He decided instead to send a majority of the Italian fleet to Ethiopia to crush whatever the Japanese possessed in the area, disregarding whatever forces that are there, just like he did so with the nation previously. Also, to those wondering, Germany wouldn't care about either side. They'd see more promise in Spain than Italy, who held claims on Austria. If Addis Ababa, the capital, fell like it did in our own timeline, I doubt Ethiopia would surrender with Japan on its side. The conflict instead would turn into one of hit-and-run tactics, at least until the Italian and Japanese navies met at sea in an eventual decisive naval battle. Now, to set the mood of this battle, Japan would have access to carriers, while Italy would rely solely on inland airfields that would lack the range and responsiveness like their counterparts. Also, no nation up to this point would really know the potency of naval aircraft carriers. So when Italy and Japan finally do meet, that advantage is going to become a clear, decisive one for Japan. Either from a decisive naval battle or the port strikes after, Italian control of the Red Sea would be moot after engaging the Japanese battle groups. Ethiopian troops would gradually force back Italian troops thanks in part to British guns and stronger embargoes, including oil this time by the League of Nations, forcing the Italians to retreat into their colonial possessions. Do the Ethiopians counterattack? I doubt it. Guerrilla tactics do not win a siege, but by the end of 1936, the Italians would be unable to move outside their cities due to critically low food and war supplies, thanks in part to the surplus of troops in the region. Hundreds of thousands of Italian and, Italian colonial forces sieged and starving in their own cities. Mussolini wouldn't want to surrender at this point, but he wouldn't have much of a say with his navy military crippled. Italy is forced to surrender, Ethiopia is freed, and Italy loses the Second Italo-Ethiopian campaign. So in regards to the peace talks, let's say in this situation that Ethiopia is able to take all of the East African Italian territory in exchange for the return of all the prisoners of war currently trapped within that area, as well as reparations to Japan. Excluding this peace, Stanley Baldwin would appear as a keeper of peace for the British people, retiring at the height of his popularity. Japan on the diplomatic stage would appear in a good light, at least until they declare war on China in late 1937, and Ethiopia would try to forge close relations with both nations that helped it win the war. But after the peace, what would become of Italy? Mussolini would want to stay in power. He'd even demand it, but I doubt he would remain there long. With the Italian navy lost, the army morale broken, and promises of Roman prestige taken away, the fascist government would begin to crumble, fast, forcing the hand of King Emmanuel III. A civil war would take place, but Italy is not Spain. Its military would splinter, with most taking the side of the king, while the most loyal blackshirts would stay close to their leader, forcing minor conflicts across the nation. Mussolini would use force to try and stay in power, but loyal forces squashed his smaller army, forcing him to flee abroad while new elections are called, and at the end of 1937, a new parliament is created. In our own timeline after the fascists fell from power, a collection of parties sprung up, representing all ranges of the ideological spectrum, with a religious center and socialist party taking first and second respectively. With a strong case for anti-war and connecting center or far-right parties with Mussolini's failed regime, I believe the socialist faction would come out ahead in this timeline, turning heads all across Europe. Does this mean an Italian or Soviet alliance? No, not a chance. Italy, like Spain, would need time to fix its own country before it ever considered joining another power in an alliance. Also, while the communists may exist in the Socialist Party, or maybe even as their own party, I doubt they would hold considerable sway in the government. Not to mention the king and previous military leaders would still play a hand in the day-to-day running of the government. In any case, reforms would begin to fix Italy's ailing economy, update its military, and rebuild its shattered navy for self-defense. These years for Italy would be a fractured state, both economically and politically, trying to rebuild itself and find its new identity. It would have no interest in foreign conflict, even as Germany starts gobbling up its neighbors. For Ethiopia, the emperor would move to modernize his war-torn nation after victory and keep relations positive with Britain as it would be his primary neighbor. To do so, the elimination of slavery would be done, which was legal up to that point, fun fact. Centralization of the government and new tax systems would also be enacted, but civil reforms or any leniency on his new territory would not be. Due to the lack of strategic partners in the area, the trend of Ethiopian isolationism would continue. So outside of Italy and Ethiopia, the shockwaves of the loss don't impact much. Spain still becomes nationalist as Germany supplies Franco's forces. With Baldwin gone in Britain, Chamberlain would replace him, and while he would still try to rearm Britain, in no way would he move to be more aggressive against Germany. Also, while France may be angered at Britain due to Italy's implosion, the need for an ally against Germany would keep them both close. The last nation I want to talk about is Japan, and while, again, on the diplomatic stage, things might be warmer towards them, that would all change with the invasion of China, especially after the atrocities at Nanking. If anything, the most lasting result would most likely be a Japan that takes the wrong lesson from the war, believing that its navy was superior to a Western power and not really learning as to why it was the case. So Japan's naval admirals now have a larger ego, and I'm sure that won't come back to bite them in the future. But that is where I'm going to end it. Thank you all for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, especially with World War II about to occur, and yes, there will be a part 2 coming in the next few weeks. Until then, I will catch you all in part 2 later.
Wait a second, before you guys go, I have a couple people I need to give a shout out to because they are so amazing, awesome, and just really supportive of my content. Those people include Milam, Ace, Chris Bailey, Folkvard, Javi, Jfoe, Joey, jrchicklis, Little Koosh, Mustaach, Onlyplayapples, PyroShark, Streakingwookie, GTA, Jakub, Ocwieja, and Kevin Gao. Thank you guys so much for your incredible support. You guys are amazing. This has been Greyshot17, and I'll see you guys next time.